Yes, sir.
So we just met at the Carolina Cannabis Convention, and we were in a presentation by Representative Kelly Alexander.
Correct.
And so he was talking about all things hemp and some issues that he was seeing, some actionable steps.
Sure.
And you stood up at the end. You said something really cool, really
Sure.
actionable, and really helpful.
Thank
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, ultimately, I was kind of forced into this whole political event of things going on. I am part owner of Charlotte CBD, and ultimately this hemp flower ban was the beginning of me getting involved. And I immediately went up to Raleigh and realized that no one in the cannabis or hemp industry was being represented at all. I had a chance to speak with some of the legislators and lawmakers personally after the event and being up there and asked them simply, why aren't we getting recognized in this industry? Why aren't we getting the votes we need for legalization? Why are we fighting for hemp flower? And ultimately, we just don't have representation in Raleigh. The average age of the politician in Raleigh is 74 years old. Most of them have been in office 20 plus years, and they're very set in their very conservative ways. A lot of them represent the rural parts of the state and have a very conservative background and their constituents as well. So ultimately, when we speak about hemp in the House of Representatives or in the Senate in Raleigh, for the most part, we're speaking to people that do not know anything about this industry or about these products, and they speak about them in a reefer madness kind of style. They do not separate hemp and marijuana whatsoever, and to them, hemp and marijuana is the worst thing that could happen. And one of the representatives, Representative Dixon, lost his son to drug addiction, and it's very personal for him, and he ties in drug addiction to cannabis use in general, even though opioids ultimately took his son's life, from what I understand. But ultimately, I think it's an educational piece. Number one, we need to educate our lawmakers, but number two, to be seen and heard, you need money and you need representation. So what I've ultimately decided to do with some help of my colleagues and coworkers is start an organization called the Hemp Retailers Association. And what it's going to be is simply an organization that collects funds and has money, unbiased money that's completely transparent in a bank account where all members can see where the money is coming from and where it's being spent. But ultimately, we need to hire legislation to represent us and a lobbyist group, which we have McGuire Woods currently representing the organization. And they're pricey. They're very expensive, but they're very effective. We hired them ultimately about 3.5 weeks ago, and they were able to move mountains in a short amount of time with a lot of work. They've worked diligently ever since. But ultimately, we're forming this Hemp Retailers Association that, of course, will be funded largely by the corporations and businesses within the industry, but I'm going to have a crowdsourcing public funding for a lot of this as well, so we can really get not only hemp fully legalized and CBD products from cannabis, but ultimately that will lead to full legalization of this plant within the state. We do hope to have chapters by state, one in North Carolina, one in South Carolina, and so on. So we will be holding elections to form the North Carolina chapter, but we'll be working with people in other states to form other chapters, because ultimately we want to be one voice, non-biased, with no business involvement, just one voice that represents not only the retailers but the manufacturers, because right now the farmers are represented by the North Carolina Industrial Hemp Association. So ultimately we need a voice, we need some money, we need unfortunately to play politics in this state. In most other states you need money to be heard and seen and recognized. And ultimately that's what we're going to do. We're going to collect funds, and we're going to hire these lobbyists, and we're going to contribute to campaigns of those that have our best interests in mind.
One of the things you said is that for a good outcome, sometimes you have to play the game.
Sure.
You said something really interesting that seemed minor, but it's like you said you would show up in shorts and a t-shirt,
Sure.
and they just looked over you like whatever.
100%.
And then you started sort of playing the game, dressing
Sure.
up, sort
Absolutely.
of acclimating to it.
And that's exactly what happened. I come from a world of I have a background in finance and banking. So for 9 years of my life, I had to wear a suit and tie every day. So I absolutely despise it. So I literally started a company to keep from having to wear a suit and tie every day. I wear a short and t-shirts. That's my uniform. And ultimately, I'm old and I'm overweight and I like to be comfortable. So when I showed up these places, I figured I no longer have a boss. I wear short t-shirts. And ultimately, people were nice, but you could tell there was not very much engagement and they kind of looked past me. I started showing up dressing nicer and I got a little more respect and attention from folks. Plus, people started to recognize me more. But once I showed up in a suit and tie, dressed up and had representation of lobbyist group, they literally had me sitting with the elected officials, and I was given copies of the bills as they were being read, and I was having things explained to me as it was being read, and that's a difference of about 3.5 weeks of hiring a lobbying firm and putting on a suit, and that much of a difference was made. And of course, a lot of other things were happening as well, but my personal experience changed dramatically just by changing those few things. And I've met a lot of friends within the elected officials and with some other committees, and ultimately we all want to combine efforts for the greater good and to get this movement taken care of, because people are suffering, people need this. Largely majority of minorities are suffering from these unjust laws, and as a double kind of whammy, they're being left out of the movement going forward. So I think reaching the peak of legalization is really just the beginning. I think once we reach that peak, we're going to see there's way more of a mountain to climb. And legalization is important, but it's important to legalize with the entrepreneur at mind, with the average citizen at mind, with adolescent use at mind, with education, with inclusion of females or minorities, because ultimately this seems to be dominated by white males, like a lot of things. So I think it's important to include everyone in this movement and everyone have a voice and come to the table. And a big gap I saw there was the retailers were not being represented at all.
Yeah.
So
I love how you're being really strategic, because
Sure.
I hear some folks on the ground level just trying to like ram their way into
Sure.
the political world. It's
Right.
like, no, it's got to be my way.
Right.
And you're really, in a way, like you're empathizing. You're saying like, here's how they're considering it. Like,
Sure.
here's how they're thinking about it.
Sure.
And let's go about it in a different way.
And that's what I'm a very passionate person, and my first attendance to those meetings, I lashed out. I kind of spoke out of turn. I yelled some things out. I got up and had a chance to do some public reference, and it was almost an attack on my part towards them. And I realized that my mom would say, and the Southern people would say, is it's easier to attract flies with honey than vinegar. And I realized that these are people too. They might not see what I see and all that, but I also saw that a lot of these things they were regurgitating or come from an area of ignorance and the propaganda that was fed to them through their generation, including Senator Dixon, which he's a 75-year-old pig farmer from rural North Carolina. He has a Mormon faith, very strongly so, and he applies it to his everyday life and his decision making. We'd like to have separation of church and state, but it's pretty obvious that it doesn't happen on a lot of levels. So I actually had a chance to sit down and talk with him, but he's genuinely upset because he has people, his constituents, that he has to answer to. Right. And he told them that we would be producing and growing rope and fabrics for hemp, and he knew nothing about smokable hemp flower. So he felt like he was duped, and ultimately what was most disconcerting is a lot of these politicians voted on this 3 or 4 times before they even knew what smokable hemp flower was, and that part is scary because they're voting against or for something that they really know nothing about. So ultimately it's poised and caused an issue amongst law enforcement, because as we know, you cannot visually or smell or taste tell the difference between what we call hemp or marijuana, which I hate using that term, another story, but ultimately there's no real quick guide of what's what. And my thoughts on it is legalize all of it. Their thoughts on it is make all of it illegal. So somewhere in between, hopefully, we're forming these committees called Connect. It's going to involve law enforcement, the hemp retailers, the hemp growers, as well as law enforcement and lawmakers. We're all going to come to the table and say, here's our issues, here's where we're going to address it and everything. We're even trying things like there is a current city council proposal in Mecklenburg County to allow the search of a vehicle because of the taste or smell or visual of cannabis, But basically any cannabis found at that point is just confiscated. You're not charged for it. Anything found beyond that, you can be charged for it. Weapons, warrants, things like that. And we're cool with that. You know what I mean? But ultimately, we don't want anybody's rights violated simply because of cannabis smell.
And it's there.
Right. And most states have gone the other way. Most states have ruled that the smell of burnt cannabis is not grounds for probable cause. And we're going through the same thing in South Carolina. They banned smokable hemp flower in South Carolina, and ultimately we still have it on our shelves. And our message there is, come arrest us. You know, this is federally legal. What we have on our shelves is in federal compliance. If you have a problem with us, come arrest us, because ultimately we want a fast track solution to this. We're joining a class action lawsuit in South Carolina, but ultimately we want to go the other direction. Give us our civil penalty, or give us our infraction, give us our ticket, or arrest us, and then we can take it to court and see where we violated what laws and on what level. Because ultimately states can't rewrite federal law. You can add to it and enhance it, but you can't take from it. And with interstate commerce laws, even if they banned it in North Carolina, South Carolina, nothing is stopping myself or any other store like me from opening a store in another state and shipping it right back to the front door of everyone in North Carolina. So at that point, we still have the issue. The cannabis is still here. We still don't know how to charge or probable cause or whatever. And not only that, all the outside states are getting the sales tax and the revenue from the sales simply because we don't want to take the time to educate and find a common solution. So ultimately, we're hoping that the Hemp Retailers Association can give us that common ground. They can give us the financial backing and the professional backing, and we'll have supporters among the group, and we'll have some celebrities that have pledged, businesses that have pledged, and we just want to show the legitimacy of this business and of the cannabis industry, and that, you know, we're smart people too. We're not dumb. We want what's best for our communities. We work hard to build these companies in our communities. We're family people. We don't want to harm anyone. We want to get away from the stigma set forth that we were lied to. We've been lied to for 70, 80 years over this. And Nixon and his cronies and Harry Anslinger, this was all based on racism and immigration controls, a lot of things that are still prevalent today. The simple name of marijuana was given to it to give it this menacing name because of the immigrants coming up through Arizona. They wanted to paint this bad picture of the immigrants. So really, if you do research, it has nothing to do with safety. It has nothing to do with the harm of this so-called drug, which is a plant, but it's all based in lies and racism and political movements, and it's time to fix it. And 32 states have done so, and I tell people often, because I get asked these questions, they said, when will North Carolina be legal? And I said, will probably be the last, and I think it'll go federal before it goes here, because we have very old people that have no term limits representing us. And there's a lot of issues, but ultimately the constituents have the power, and we need to remember that, and we need to take that power back, and we need to put people in the office that reflect our values and needs.
I just finished reading a book. It was just called Marijuana. I think the guy was David Hobright or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was really eye-opening because he went just all the way back to the 1800s, just talking about how it all came to be today, right? Like, it's not just like it was something really awful. It was just a lot of personal opinions and views and trying to suppress certain
the ultimate statement that started this movement was from Harry S. Anslinger, and he said that when white women smoke marijuana, that it makes them want to have sex with black men. And ultimately, that's the statement that started this whole nightmare mess. And then with the propaganda films like Reefer Madness or whatever, and then you have, Nixon and his people, and Nixon even commissioned 2 studies to be done to show how bad this drug is, and it did the opposite. It did the opposite. It's like, hey, actually, this is fixing this and reducing tumors and doing all that. He was like,
that's not what I want to say.
That's not. But he now, there's now recordings of him saying that they knew all along that it was harmless, that they wanted to go after jazz musicians, aka the black community, and that they wanted to go after the anti-war people, aka the hippies. The common denominator in both of those was the cannabis use, and it was a low-hanging fruit, and it was the easy way for them to target and to imprison these groups of people, and not only imprison them for minor offenses, but to keep them in there a long time and to make money off them sitting in prison. So it's so many faceted issues that have grown from this, and now it's such a hot button. But finally, I think we have the numbers in our favor, and people are finally educated. You know, and it's interesting. You can look on social media and things and see these cops with their drug bust. And 5 years ago, even though you'd read the comments and people, way to go, you know, good job, you know, the hell with criminals, whatever. But now you read the comment and it's like, wow, you've stolen someone's medicine.
Yeah.
You've stole someone's property. You have other work to do. You have bigger and better crimes to go fight. And you can see that movement among social media. You can see it in the polls out there. People are waking up. They're realizing that we've been lied to. They realize that there's more to this whole thing.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I just want to add to that, continue to educate, continue to end the stigma, and take that motivation and that movement with some funds and the right-minded people. I want professional, educated people to stand up and say, I'm a cannabis user, I'm a good family person, I'm a good business person, I'm a healthy person, I'm a mentally healthy person, I'm a pillar of the community. I need people to come out of the woodwork. I need people to be able to stand up and freely talk about this without fear of prosecution or fear of losing their job. Or, you know, I have a lot of first responders that come in my store. I've got a U.S. Marshal that comes in my store. I have police officers that come in my store and they take my products, and some of them risk their jobs. Some of them have gone to their superiors and saying, I'm taking these products, fire me if you got to, but I need it. And some have approved it, but none of them are willing to come forward in the public and say it. And I don't blame them, because they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to lose their tenures. They don't want to lose their retirement funds and all that. And it's time to change it. And it's time to be the voice for those people that can't speak right now.
That's awesome, man. So obviously you're super busy with your just work, right?
Sure.
But it seems like you're taking on just a higher purpose.
Right.
And thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
How do people get in touch with you, or just, you know, where you want them to?
Sure. Ultimately, I do have a couple businesses going or whatever, but this is a passion for mine. Sleep can come later. But my name is Michael Sims, S-I-M-S. My phone number is 704-605-4878. That is my personal cell phone number. I can be reached at any time. I'm a little behind because I've been traveling, but I'll get back to you. Also, you can email me at mike@cltcbd.com. And that's short for Charlotte CBD, but that's mike@cltcbd.com. Either one of those, get in touch with me. We are forming what's called the Hemp Retailers Association, the Facebook page, and the web page is being built right now. Our FEIN number is approved. We're waiting on final approval so we can link to our bank account next week, and we can start collecting funds. We're going to do a crowdsourcing and really get this movement going. We got McGuire Woods as our lobbyist group, and Bo Heath over there, he's going to help us build this organization to be a real powerhouse. I have big plans for it, and I think if we combine and get other states involved and other chapters, we can really get this movement going. We have senators now with the Moore bill, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and a few other people, the House Majority Leader. A few people are backing this bill and written it, so at least it has to be voted on now. But I want to make sure we're getting in these people's boxes and offering our support as much as possible, but also knowing who's fighting this and find ways we can fight the people fighting it. So
awesome. And before I post this, I'll reach out just to get. I know you're working on different websites, social media presences for the Retailers Association.
Yes.
And then we'll post it out there.
Yeah, and I want to let people know too. Like, obviously, I own other businesses, but we want to make it very important and very known that this is going to be completely separate from all their businesses. It's its own account. We're going to have complete transparency. We're going to hold an election to elect officials. This is kind of like, I want to get it started, but I want to step back and make sure everyone's involved, completely unbiased, no businesses involved whatsoever except for the greater good of legalizing cannabis. And complete transparency. I need people's involvement. The slightest donation helps. $1 helps, $5 helps. But we'll have all that in place very soon. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Awesome. It's really cool. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.